What if I told you that history has forgotten one of India's greatest warriors, a Hindu emperor whose empire stretched from Kashmir to Iran and deep into Central Asia, a ruler so powerful that his name was recorded in Arab, Persian, and Chinese chronicles. Yet, modern Indian history books barely mention it. We are often taught that the first Islamic invasion of India happened in 712 AD when Muhammad bin Qasim attacked Sindh. After that, history books leap forward to the devastating raid of Mahmud of Ghazni in the 11th century. But have you ever wondered why was there a gap of over 300 years between these two invasions? What happened during this period that made India an impenetrable fortress? Was it merely the downfall of the Umayyad Caliphate, or there is far more decisive reason? Did someone crush these invaders so brutally that they never dared to look towards India again? This is the forgotten tale of that warrior, a king whose valor echoed across Central Asia, whose empire shattered the ambitions of foreign invaders, and whose name once commanded fear across battlefields stretching from Himalayas to the Caspian Sea. This is the story of Lalitaditya Muktapida, the greatest ruler of the Karkota dynasty. To understand his unstoppable rise, we first must go back in time to an era when India's northern borders stood on the brink of invasion, and one king changed the course of history forever. By the early 8th century CE, India stood at a perilous crossroads. The northern frontiers were under relentless threat, and the fate of the subcontinent teetered on a knife's edge. If a decisive ruler did not emerge, history could have taken an entirely different course. The Arab Caliphate, expanding at an unprecedented pace, had already swept through the Middle East and Persia. Their next target was India. In 712 CE, the Umayyad general Muhammad bin Qasim launched an invasion of Sindh, marking the first Islamic conquest in the subcontinent. But unlike Persia and Central Asia, which fell swiftly to the Arabs, India proved to be an entirely different battlefield. When Qasim's forces crossed into Sindh, they faced ferocious resistance from King Dahir of the Brahmin dynasty. Though Dahir was ultimately defeated, his death did not bring the swift victory the Arabs had expected. Even after seizing Sindh, they found themselves unable to advance deeper into the Indian heartland. For nearly 300 years, no major Islamic invasion succeeded. Mainstream historians often credit this to the internal collapse of the Umayyad Caliphate, but the reality is far more intriguing. The Arabs did attempt further incursions, yet each time they were met with a force so powerful, so relentless, that their armies trembled at the very thought of marching eastward. That forces was led by a warrior whose name still echoes in ancient Arabic texts, Lalitaditya Muktapida. But the Arab threat was not the only challenge facing India. The Tibetan Empire, which had once been a loose confederation of mountain tribes, had transformed into an aggressive military force. These armies had already seized control of vast regions of Central Asia, and now they were planning to push into Ladakh and Kashmir, threatening to cut off India's crucial northern trade routes. To the northwest, the Turkic forces of the Bactria and the Tukhara region were expanding their reach. Known for their brutality and ruthless invasions, these warlords plundered cities, left devastation in their wake, and were beginning to eye India's northwestern territories. Meanwhile, in the Far East, the Tang dynasty of China was at its zenith. Though not an immediate enemy of India, the growing influence in Central Asia complicated the geopolitical landscape. Any Indian ruler seeking expansion or security would have to navigate China's rising dominance carefully. Within India, the political landscape was fractured. The great Harshvardhan of Pushyabhuti dynasty had passed away, and with him, his empire had crumbled. Kannauj, the once glorious capital of North India, now stood vulnerable, its prestige intact, but its military power severely weakened. With Arabs advancing from the west, Tibet pressing from the north, Turkic raiders threatening from the northwest, and an internal division weakening the Indian subcontinent, Bharat desperately needed a strong, decisive leader. And that's when Lalitaditya Muktapida rose to power. But unlike the kings who focused only on defending their lands, Lalitaditya had a grander vision. He understood that the true security does not come from waiting behind the fortress walls. It comes from striking first, from marching into enemy lands before they can even think of invading yours. Instead of merely protecting India, Lalitaditya embarked on an offensive campaign unlike any before him. He didn't wait for the war to reach his doorsteps. He carried the war to the Arabs, Tibetans, and Turks, obliterating their ambitions before they could ever set foot deeper into Bharat. This was no ordinary king. This was a force of history, a warrior whose actions could shape the destiny of the subcontinent and make India unconquerable for centuries. But how did he do it? How did one ruler defeat three of the most powerful invading forces of his time? Before he could achieve his grand vision, he had to first eliminate his greatest domestic rival, Yashovarman of Kannauj. With fire in his heart, Lalitaditya Muktapida set his sight on the first major conquest, Kannauj, the political and cultural heart of North India. But standing in his way was a formidable rival, a king whose ambitions matched his own, Yashovarman of Kannauj. This was not just a battle for land. This was a battle for supremacy, a war that would decide who would shape the future of Bharat. Yashovarman was no ordinary ruler. He rose from the ashes of Harshvardhan's empire, determined to restore Kannauj's lost glory. The city was North India's most prestigious capital, a beacon of culture and power. He was seen as Harsha's successor, the one who could reunite India under a single throne. But Lalitaditya had far greater plans. While Yashovarman's focus was on consolidating power within India, Lalitaditya's vision was far grander. He did not just want to rule Bharat. He wanted to expand it beyond its traditional frontiers, to crush invaders before they could set foot on Indian soil. Two powerful kings, one inevitable clash. The battle for dominance was about to begin. Lalitaditya marched south from Kashmir, leading a lightning-fast campaign, covering vast distances in record time. His highly disciplined army moved like a storm. 50,000 cavalry, 30,000 infantry, and 10,000 war elephants, backed by elite archers and master technicians. Yashovarman, however, was no easy foe. His forces, though slightly smaller, were well-trained, battle-hardened, and fiercely loyal. The two armies clashed outside Kannauj in a battle that would determine the fate of North India. Yashovarman positioned his army in open terrain, using heavy cavalry and war elephants to break enemy formation. His soldiers fought with unwavering resolve, determined to hold their ground. But Lalitaditya was a strategic genius. He lured Yashovarman's forces into a trap, feigning a retreat before launching a devastating counterattack. His cavalry outmaneuvered Yashovarman's lines, striking from the flanks and crippling his war elephants before they could charge. Then came the archers. Deadly volleys of arrows rained down, cutting through enemies' rank. The once mighty army of Kannauj began to falter. At that moment, Lalitaditya unleashed his war elephants. This massive beast tore through enemy lines, crushing resistance beneath their feet. Yashovarman's forces collapsed, their formations scattered beyond repair. The battle was over. Kannauj had fallen. The once mighty Yashovarman stood defeated. His army lay in ruins, his dreams of empire crushed. But Lalitaditya was not like other conquerors. Instead of executing his rival, he offered him a place within his growing dominion. Yashovarman, though humbled, was spared. Kannauj was not pillaged or burned, but absorbed into Lalitaditya's empire. With Kannauj now under his control, Lalitaditya Muktapida was the undisputed master of the north. But his ambition stretched far beyond the Indian subcontinent. While most kings would have been satisfied with this glorious victory, Lalitaditya was not like most kings. His true mission was only just beginning. With Kannauj conquered and North India under his command, Lalitaditya Muktapida turned his gaze towards the greatest threats to Bharat's sovereignty. His next war would take him through the treacherous mountain of Ladakh, the vast deserts of Central Asia, and even to the very heart of the Arab Empire itself. But how did he do it? How did one Hindu king bring terror to the Arabs, the Tibetans, and the Turks all at once? His first target was the Tibetan Empire, an expansionist force that has seized control of key trade routes in Ladakh and Baltistan. Their growing influence along the Silk Road posed a direct threat to India's economy and strategic stability. If they were not stopped, they would push deeper into Indian territory, just as they had done in the past. Lalitaditya led his armies through the unforgiving terrain of Himalayas, facing not just enemy warriors, but deadly altitudes, extreme cold, and brutal weather conditions. But this was no ordinary army. His soldiers were battle-hardened warriors, trained to fight in extreme conditions. In a decisive campaign, he shattered the Tibetan stronghold, reclaiming Ladakh and Baltistan, securing India's northern frontiers once and for all. Yet war was not his only weapon. Lalitaditya understood that sometimes alliance could achieve what bloodshed could not. He extended his hand to the Tang dynasty of China, which was also locked in conflict with the Tibetans. The alliance between India and China dealt a devastating blow to the Tibetan forces, ensuring that from that moment on, the Himalayas were no longer a vulnerability. They had become an impenetrable shield for Bharat. But while the northern frontier was now secure, the real danger lay in the west. Since the fall of Sindh to Muhammad bin Qasim in 712 CE, the Arab Caliphate had set its sight on India. The same empire that had crushed Persia, seized Central Asia, and dominated North Africa now sought to claim Bharat at its next conquest. But unlike Persia, India would not fall so easily. For 300 years, the Caliphate's army dared not march further east. Why? Because one name struck terror into the hearts of Arab generals: Lalitaditya Muktapida. But before he could face the Arabs, another enemy stood in his way: the Turkic warlords of Bactria and Afghanistan. These were no mere raiders. They had already subjugated much of Central Asia. Their stronghold in Bactria, Badakhshan, and Kabul serving as launching points for attacks on India's northwestern provinces. Lalitaditya led his army into the rugged mountains of Afghanistan, his forces moving with precision and speed. The Turkic warlords, who had once terrorized small Indian kingdom, now found themselves facing a force unlike any they had ever encountered. One by one, their cities fell: Bactria, Balkh, and finally Kabul. Lalitaditya had achieved what few before him had dared. He had brought the fight to the very lands from where invaders once launched their attacks on India. But his ambition did not stop there. With the Turks crushed, his armies now stood at the doorstep of the most powerful empire of that time, the Arab Caliphate. For the Arabs, India was the final jewel left unconquered. They had already seized Persia, parts of Central Asia and North Africa, and was simply waiting for the right moment to push into Bharat. But Lalitaditya had no intention of waiting. In a series of brutal campaigns, he took the war to the Arabs. His forces marched through Kabul and into Turkestan, striking at the Arab-controlled city of Bukhara. The governor of Bukhara, Momin, underestimated Lalitaditya's army, a mistake that would prove disastrous. In 4 decisive battles, the Arab forces were completely crushed. Lalitaditya did not just defeat them, he humiliated them. According to Al-Burini's Tariq-e-Hind, prisoners of war were sent back with half of their heads shaved, a symbol of utter defeat and disgrace. The message was clear: India was not Persia. India was not Central Asia. As long as warriors like Lalitaditya existed, India would never be conquered. With this victory, the Arab expansion into India was permanently stalled. The same empire that had steamrolled through continents now feared Bharat's warriors. But Lalitaditya was far from finished. His conquest continued, stretching into Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and even the borders of Iran. His armies marched as far as the Caspian Sea, leaving a legacy that would be recorded not just in Indian texts, but also in Chinese and Arab chronicles. Yet, Lalitaditya was not just a conqueror. Wherever his armies went, they carried more than swords. They carried civilization. Unlike other conquerors who pillaged and plundered, Lalitaditya spread the knowledge, culture, and traditions of Sanatan Dharma. His campaigns were not just about expansion, they were about preserving and strengthening India's influence. He built temples, universities, and trade centers, ensuring that India's legacy remained long after his armies had left. Among his greatest achievements was the Martand Sun Temple, a magnificent architectural marvel that even in its ruined state today stands as a testament to India's forgotten genius. But as his empire grew, one question remained. What happened to Lalitaditya? How did a ruler who conquered half of Asia simply disappear from history? The mystery of his fate remains one of the greatest enigmas of Indian history. Lalitaditya Muktapida was unstoppable. He had secured India's northern frontier, crushed the Turks of Bactria and Afghanistan, and humiliated the Arab Caliphate, and expanded Bharat's influence deep into Central Asia. His empire stretched from Kashmir to the Caspian Sea, and his name was feared across continents. And then, suddenly, he vanished. There's no clear records of his death, no grand inscription celebrating his final moments, no monuments marking his last battle. The mighty emperor who defeated the greatest power of his time simply disappeared from history. But how? Some historians believe that Lalitaditya perished in Central Asia during one of his expeditions into Iran or beyond. It is said that he kept marching forward, leading his armies into unknown lands, never to return. Did he die in a battle surrounded by enemies? Or was his final campaign lost in time, its records buried in the shifting sand of history? Another theory suggests betrayal. The powerful forces within his own court turned against him. Was he poisoned? Did his own advisors conspire to erase his legacy, fearing that no other king should ever dream of an empire as vast as his? Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: his disappearance marked the decline of his empire. Without him, the Karkota dynasty weakened, and the vast territories he conquered slowly slipped away. But perhaps the greater mystery is not how he disappeared, but why his name was erased from history. Lalitaditya was not the only Hindu emperor who achieved greatness, only to be deliberately sidelined. Just like Vikramaditya, Bappa Rawal, and Rajendra Chola, his story was buried, while foreign rulers were glorified. Why is it that invaders like Mahmud of Ghazni, Muhammad Ghori, and Akbar are given prime space in our history books, but the emperors who defended Bharat, expanded its borders, and brought glory to its civilization are forgotten? This is not an accident. It is by design. For centuries, foreign powers ruled over India, and they rewrote history to suit their narrative. They celebrated their conquest, but erased the stories of the warriors who had once defended India so fiercely that no invader could touch Bharat for centuries. And Lalitaditya was one of them. The Arab records spoke of him with fear and respect. The Chinese chronicles recognized his power. The Rajat Rangini, written by Kalhana, immortalized his rule. Yet today, his name barely exists in Indian textbooks. Who benefits from erasing powerful Hindu emperors from history? By forgetting kings like Lalitaditya, Vikramaditya, and Rajendra Chola, we forgot that India was once a global superpower. We forgot that our ancestors were not just defenders. They were conquerors. They carried Bharat's civilization beyond its border, shaping cultures far beyond the subcontinent. And this is exactly what the invaders wanted. They wanted us to believe that India was always weak, always fragmented, always waiting to be saved. They wanted us to believe that only the foreign rulers built great empires, that only their history mattered. But history remembers. Lalitaditya's legacy was too grand to be erased completely. His conquest, his victories, his empire, they still echo in forgotten text, in lost inscriptions, and in ruins of his architectural marvels like the Martand Sun Temple. His story is not just a tale from the past. It is a reminder of what India once was and what it can be again. But what does it say about us? When our own kings are forgotten, if we do not remember our own heroes, then who will? If we do not tell their stories, then who will ensure that the truth of Bharat's history is passed on to the future generations? History is not just about what is recorded. It is about what is remembered. And it is our duty to remember it. If you found this video eye-opening, watch a deep dive on how Samrat Vikramaditya created Akhand Bharat, a crucial piece of history that we must not forget. The link is in the description. This is Harry signing off. Stay curious. Jai Hind.